Hello to Getting APIs to Work. Today we say hello to Marjukka Niinioja. Hey Marjukka, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Very hot in the sunny Finland, over 30 degrees this summer.
It's good to have you on the show. It's kind of weird to have people from Finland complaining about hot weather, but this is, I guess, the world we live in now.
Yep.
So what we want to do today is talk about APIOps Cycles, a method that you developed. And mostly for this episode, I want to focus on why it even exists, because I think there's a very interesting backstory to it. And we can dive into the details in later episodes, and I'd love to do that. But for now, let's just talk about why do you need this method? Give us a little bit of kind of the origin story, so to speak, of why you started working on this method.
Yeah. Thanks for asking. It's actually an interesting story, and I'm resisting the temptation of starting once upon a time, but yeah, there was a reason. I was working in a big retail, like fourth biggest retailer in Europe, and then before that in startups and in public sector and other places. And there were a lot of developers developing APIs and a lot of business people, UX people, architects who absolutely wanted to wash their hands of any APIs. They just didn't understand why they should bother. And that was causing a lot of problems because it's not actually impossible to develop APIs that would make any kind of business sense without the business people being involved.
But I like the fact that you said that make business sense, because of course it is possible to develop APIs in this context, yes. And it happens all the time. Right?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the thing. We were seeing a lot of APIs kind of growing and popping up all around, but they really often were just done to fit one purpose, one app or something, or an integration. And then there was a big backlog and portfolio of all kinds of cool business projects that were starting to need those APIs, but they just couldn't be used because they were very limited in scope. And the data modeling, the endpoints, the security, nothing worked. And then the biggest problem was that I saw all these companies, all the subcontractors and everybody else doing these APIs. And then API management was starting to be a bigger thing. Obviously, there had been companies that had been using API management before. This was 2016, 2017. But when API management became more of a mainstream, these teams and the teams managing those platforms suddenly realized that the APIs were not publishable via API management. They were not standard. They didn't have any open API or any other kind of specification files. There were a lot of problems at the stage when you actually had to publish an API and get it into the world and into the hands of the developers. And at that time, it really took a lot of rework from the teams and delays to do them again, basically, to get them fit in. And
so in the end, yeah, like what you saw was like a lack of guidance. Process.
Lack of guidance, yeah. Basically, everybody was like, there were two groups or three groups maybe. There were the UX and UI designers, and then there were the architects and the software developers, and then you could argue that there were like business analysts and enterprise architects, but all of those didn't really talk to each other. And then in some companies there was even a product manager and possibly some integration, platform owner and whatever, and all of those people had their own disciplines and their own methods and their own kind of design tools and practices, but they were absolutely not able to talk to each other. So let's say that the enterprise architect comes into the room and draws a couple of kind of diagrams of processes, and then the software architect comes in and does some sequence diagram and then the integration architect comes in and starts drawing lines between boxes or whatever, and nobody really understands, even from the IT people, they don't even understand each other. And then you have the UX and UI guys who are throwing in the wireframes of applications and expecting everything to have a user interface, which is absolutely not true. I'm like, I have said to my customers a lot of times that user interface is dead. And they are looking at me like I'm crazy. But seriously, user interface as we have known it is dying in a lot of places. You have machine learning algorithms, you have a lot of devices and that talk to each other via APIs. And a lot of times you have kind of an ecosystem journey. You have different organizations giving their key resources, their key capabilities as an API. And so you don't even need to show that in a user interface, or you don't even have to develop it. You just need to tie it into your architecture and so all of those things were not caught by the current design tools and design methods. And plus, there was an existing problem with or without APIs, that these different roles and people couldn't actually talk to each other. It was just made much more clearer in the world of APIs. So I was asked a lot because I was leading some of the API programs at the retail company, and then I jumped into a consulting company called Digia after that, where I actually started developing this method. And it was because of, I was getting asked a lot, like, how did you make this really successful API program? How did you get all the teams and all the developers and all the business people understanding how to do APIs and that fast? I mean, we had to actually squeeze a 12-month project into a 3-month project and do APIs in lots of different countries and web shops and everything else, and multi-channel systems. And I had to get even the hardware store, like the building hardware store, salespeople using APIs with Postman, because we had to do things so fast that was the only way for them to test if the product availability would be correct in the APIs, for example, in the store. But I mean, get all these people to communicate together and all the different developers with their different ways of doing, there needed to be one method.
So that's a nice story, actually, that people would, like, you would force them to use Postman, right? Because that is really something where, like, everybody needs to understand what an API is, not really totally completely on the technical level, but they know what it does. So I think that's success already.
Exactly. And to understand why they have to do it. And then that requires that the API has a data model and endpoints that are human understandable. The developers or the systems or something like the technical people wouldn't necessarily need that, but the business people definitely need that. For example, this summer I had to force my 16-year-old son to use an API with Postman because of a thing that he needed to do in his summer job. And he was like, "Oh, Mom, why do I need to do this?" And he was trying to read the API documentation, and he was trying to understand what an API is and trying to understand what he was supposed to achieve by doing it. And I think that kind of needs us to have business understandable APIs, and it needs us to also be able to kill a lot of APIs before they are even being born, because a lot of times, if we are thinking from technical point of view, it would be so easy just to kind of push a commit into a repo and just get some CRUD APIs out there from the database almost, or from the code. And
that happens as we speak everywhere around the planet all the time.
Yeah, I mean, like, there is use case for that sort of stuff, but those are really not business APIs. And you probably actually give birth to a lot of APIs that shouldn't even be around and will cause you problems when you security problems or problems when you are trying to show them to your partners and customers. You need a lot of support. One of the reasons, like when developing this method and actually putting together a lot of the stuff that was already out there. So I wanted to first of all use things that these different roles and people from different practice areas were already familiar with. So I wanted the business people to be comfortable and the product people with value proposition canvas-like things and business model canvas-like things. And then the architects and the developers to be reasonably comfortable with few of the more technical canvases, but also some of the checklist and the guidelines there. But then
and that's something that I really like, right? That you have, like, it takes many things that exist and just puts them in this new context. I think that really is, for me, also, like you said, it's one of the things where it's something that people are familiar with. You don't have to, start from zero. So a lot of people have seen some kind of canvases, and then they feel like, oh yeah, I know this, right? Now I just need to put it into a different context. So I think that helps a lot. Have you encountered like people like suggesting that there could be other things in there, or is everybody kind of happy with the combo of things in there?
I think that there has been questions about, like, we were talking about why not user stories, and then there were like architect kind of people who were asking, like, okay, why do we not have architecture diagrams there? Why these sort of canvases, and like which basically look like something from a children's coloring book or something, but actually all of those have a reason to be or not to be there. And when we have discussed these things, then we have reached some kind of a mutual agreement on why it's not there. And obviously, a lot of companies are using this method as a baseline for their own guidelines. So obviously, if you think that user stories should be there, even though I can explain to you why they are not, if you really think that they need to be there, then you can write that, okay, in our organization or in this customer's organization, we will use this like this, and then matches there. But there have been some domain specific suggestions, and then also some. The one thing that people are really wanting to have there is examples, and actually we do have them at this moment. They are in the paid courses that we have, but maybe we'll get some more examples out there to the Creative Commons license. And of course, I would welcome everybody to contribute also to the method, their examples.
Because I found the thing that you said about the architecture diagrams, I found fascinating, because what I really like about APIOps Cycles is that it's strictly about the API, right? It's about the interface. Yeah. It's not about the implementation. And I think this is what, like, oftentimes gets mixed together and oftentimes not with great results, right? That people, like, I mean, you may need architecture diagrams later on when you start implementing things and so forth, but that's a different activity. And I think that part is really valuable, that if you stick to what you have defined, right, you're forced to just think about the interface. And whenever you kind of wander off into, now how do we implement it, you kind of you're not there anymore.
Not there, yeah, exactly. And that's what we have found, that at the time of developing that method, GraphQL was an inkling in the eye. Basically, there were some things going on with GraphQL, but definitely not gRPC. Async API was just an innocent baby and things like that. So basically, what was so cool to see is that the method is really working in a very agnostic way, even on the interface level. So the only thing that is REST-ish or like specifically to REST is the design guide, which is supposed to serve only as a kind of baseline for the guides that you should have. And from that, we actually did do some more blogs and guidelines on what to look out for when designing GraphQL interfaces. And in that sense, the REST is still there. Like you have to have really a good REST design and build the GraphQL kind of things on top of it. But I think that a very good interface should really be the interface and it really should kind of serve the purpose that it needs to serve from a business point of view, and it should be understood, and it should, like, I mean, a lot of the same stuff, even from functionality point of view, work if you just have a really good plan to it, and you have like the non-functional requirements, and you have the data requirements in place, plus the business model, and you know who are going to use it and why. And so a lot of, for example, issues that we see in GraphQL APIs or different kinds of APIs nowadays are around security, availability, and a lot of other things that actually are covered in the method from a business point of view, because there is such a thing even as a too secure API for the purpose.
Yeah, there definitely is. Yeah.
Most of the headlines are about security leaks, obviously, but you always have to balance out what is the need for the business and for the future API consumers. And you need to be able to loan some stuff from UX and customer experience design and really do some research and testing and validation with the user. So the whole point of APIOps Cycles was that it's lean. So it only kind of guides you through the very essential stuff that you need to do, and it helps you even kill your babies. It helps you to kill a lot of APIs or a lot of extra functionality before you have coded any line or made any API design. And that's equally important.
It's lean, that's true. I mean, that part I like. But I think what I most like, to be honest, and what I see where the biggest value is for a lot of organizations is that it just shifts your focus to, you know, think about like, why am I even doing this? Like we have,
I mean, like that's
we
the
have
first
so
problem.
many, right. We have so many organizations where they say, oh, let's do APIs. And then basically they immediately jump into, well, then any API probably is fine. And they just start churning out APIs, which really are not
really
that
costly.
great.
And the thing is
costly,
that
yes.
It's costly and it takes a lot of time and resources. Yeah.
Yes, it takes a lot of time and resources. They don't get the return on investment out of it that they wanted to, right? So they have they develop APIs, but nobody uses them because they never thought about why would anybody even use that API, or apart from like that one consumer, right? So, and that's one of the things where I like this pattern of still doing basically one-to-one integrations only with APIs. Right. This is one of the most problematic patterns that I see in organizations. And this is like, maybe this is why I like APIOps Cycles so much, because that's the thing that you can really
it helps you,
right? And say, look, this is not like you need to create a product, and a product means it's reusable.
Reusable to a sensible extent. Because there are also misguided ideas sometimes in organizations that when you have an API, then, like, let's say the famous thing about customer APIs, that organizations think
always
that,
that one,
you have
yes.
that one customer API, and then everybody everywhere is going to use that one customer API. And I've told this joke a lot of times in my trainings and consulting, but seriously, we have this joke in Finland that can you put a Finn, a Russian, and a Swedish person into the same sauna? Sometimes the nationalities vary, but because they are lovely neighbors, we use them a lot. But okay, like what happens if you put them into the same sauna? And usually, you know, the story has some kind of an ending. But let's say that if you try to put a Russian, a Finn, and a Swede into or Norwegian into the same customer API, that might also turn out badly because there are totally different requirements and legislation and a lot of other things. And so there's a lot of reasons why, like one customer that we just used the APIOps Cycles for, both to design some APIs, but also to design their guidelines, internal guidelines. So customer API was exactly the thing that was the target there. And there was this idea of total reuse, but actually they had already identified that they had 3 levels of security requirements for those the customer data and a bunch of other things. And so we ended up actually defining 3 different customer APIs, but it was really easy to do with the APIOps Cycles method, because it was quite easy to immediately start seeing that, okay, these features are, you know, feasible to put into one API, and these should be put into another, and to consider the pains and the gains of things, and also the other non-functional requirements, and security stuff. So in that sense, yes, it became 3 different API products, but it was really good because you had a clear definition of you should use this API for these purposes and this other API for these purposes. And we were able to find out the API consumer segments and all the other things that you need for a well-productized API. And obviously that should then go from the kind of planning phase to whatever open API spec or other things that you do, and eventually into the API gateway and the documentation and a lot of other things, and the tests and other stuff that you will develop.
I think the customer that actually is that is a good story, the customer API, because that's always that's everywhere.
Yeah,
the one API that everybody has.
Yeah, but it's the one thing that separates the juniors from the seniors to know when to touch an API with like gloves and.
No, but I like that. I like that story of, you know, saying, yeah, sure, you don't want to integrate every application separately, but then like having 3 buckets that have clearly identifiable needs, right, and how to address those needs, and then build a product for those needs. I think that really is a nice story.
But
and I think that's also it's a good
it requires just some real old-fashioned product management thinking in that, because otherwise you're just going to be the integration developer who just takes, you know, a set of requirements and just implements them and doesn't really think if these were like reusable requirements or similar to these other things. And that's where this method also helps. It forces the right people into the right table and kind of start thinking of that. Who are all the people, who are all the applications that need this API?
I think that is an excellent teaser, so to speak, for the next conversation that I will try to rope you into, which would be about API product management. I think that that also it's something that is closely related. And I think that's also something that a lot of organizations kind of struggle with.
And it really needs a lot of work, let's say.
Yes. Okay, Marjukka, thanks so much for joining. I think it was a really interesting story. It also points out a lot of, let's say, potential that you have in many organizations today. So Any closing words from you about APIOps Cycles, where it stands, maybe where it's going?
I think that one of the things we need to do, I mean, like there's a lot of organizations around the world basically using it, big ones and smaller ones, but I think that we need to solve the problem of the examples. And we are redoing the site a bit in the upcoming months and looking at actually building the community more. So actually, if anybody sees this, if you're interested in any kind of community management role within the APIOps Cycles and APIOps community, then give me some ping somewhere like LinkedIn or something. But yeah, there's going to be stuff happening around it, let's say.
That's good to hear. I'm looking forward to that. And yes, I'd like to encourage anybody who might be interested to get in touch with Marjukka. I think it's an excellent thing, and we need this kind of methods so that we can have more good APIs.
Yeah.
And with that, I think we're done for the day. Marjukka, once again, thanks for joining, and enjoy the sunshine in Finland. Here in Switzerland, it's kind of gloomy again.
For today. Tomorrow it's going to start raining.
Okay.
Yeah.
Back to normal, maybe.
Yes. See you sometime again. Bye.
Yeah, okay. Bye-bye.